So the next thing I want to do is introduce some of the data types that PHP supports. Currently we have our Hello World application here. I'm just going to erase all of this. We won't need that all. And then the next thing is I'm going to open up PHP. So I put the opening tag for PHP, and then I'm going to have a closing tag for PHP down here. And anything in between these two, it will execute those PHP commands. And we saw one already. We had echo hello PHP. Okay, so now I've modified my indexed PHP page. Let's run this and see what we get here. And you can see it says hello PHP. Now if I look at what's coming back from the server here and I look at the page source, you can see now there's no HTML markup coming back. It's just the string hello PHP. And that's okay. We have this sandbox now where we can run PHP commands and talk a little bit about data types. Now before we talk about data types, I want to introduce a couple of important concepts. First of all, if I have nothing else in this file and this is the last piece, you see how there's little squigglies here? My ID is telling me I don't need that. And so I can remove this closing tag and there's nothing else that I need. But if I had, for example, some markup down here, then I would need this closing PHP tag. I don't have anything in the bottom of this file, and so we're just going to go ahead and delete that closing PHP tag. Now the next thing you can see right here, it's giving me a little red squiggly. And it says it's expecting a semicolon because that's how you end a PHP command line. I want to have a semicolon at the end of all of my PHP command lines. And so that echo command now should still run, and I will end up with the same thing here. And you can see that. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do, I want to introduce the concept of variables. Now variables allow us to have dynamic data. So variables take a name, it's a variable name, and then we can set it equal to a value. Now just based upon that language, I'm going to have a name. Now variable names always start with a $sign. That's how you define a variable. And then you can type whatever you want here for the variable name. In fact, you can type garbage if you want. And then you set it equal to some, and we'll just put value here. And then of course, it's expecting that this is a PHP command line, and I have to finish my command line with a semicolon. So this is a valid variable. Its name is ASLDKFJAS. And its value is value. And you can see that my ID is complaining that this variable it says a typo. It's looking for a misspelling here. But in general, you want your variable names to mean something. So a better name for this might be value 1. Now it's not complaining anymore, but that's our first value. Our variable name is value _1. And I'm using what's called snake case here. And I'll use that for almost everything because I prefer snake case. But you can also use something called camel case, like that. Camel case and snake case, they're just trying to make that variable name a little bit easier to read. Again, my preference is a snake case, so I will keep that. And once you have a value defined, now we can use our echo command to echo out that value. So if I run this again, and now you can see here's the value of value 1. And it just says value, and it's echoed up on the same line as the hello PHP. If you don't want this on the same line, you have to introduce a line break. Now a line break over here, this is going to be interpreted as HTML. And so really what I want is, I want to put a line break in here, but I want to put HTML values. And so I can put this BR tag after hello world. And again, this is just a line break. And so we can see that now we'll add a line break after the hello PHP, and I'll put value on a separate line. Now I'm going to be using line breaks kind of often. And so what I want to do is maybe let's create a variable for a line break. So maybe our first variable that makes sense in this PHP script is line break, and it's going to be set equal to this BR. So I'm going to go ahead and move this up, because now that I have a variable called line break, I want to be able to echo that out after every time I echo a string. So hello world, I want to be able to echo line break. And then I echo this out, and then I want to be able to echo line break. And so now everything should be on separate lines again. And so you can see after refreshing, everything is indeed on separate lines. So before we get to data types, I want to add one more concept here. It's important that we be able to document our code. We can add comments to our code by using a /, and then we can say maybe this is the greeting, and this is our first variable. So now by having these different little comments, we can make our code more readable. And I'm going to use comments like this just to help us keep everything clear in our heads. The comments don't have to come, on top or just on their own line. They could come after something. So right here, I could put the comment out here. And I don't necessarily need it on the same line, so I can remove it here. Now, comments don't impact what's output. So these are just for us. The PHP engine isn't going to interpret or do anything special with the comments. So I refresh the page, even though there's comments in there, I'll still end up with the same output here. Okay, so the next thing I want to do in this video is I want to introduce data types. And we're just going to clean this up. We don't need this anymore. In fact, we're going to go ahead and get rid of all of this. I'm going to keep my line break around because I'm going to use that in a little bit. But I want to enumerate some of the data types. And we're just going to use some of the more common data types. There's a few others that exist that we're not going to talk about in this video that we'll cover in later videos. One of the most common data types is a string. So a string is just a number of characters that are concatenated together. It's a string of characters if you want. And string variables are used to hold data for things like names. For example, my first name is Bob. And so we can introduce a variable called first name, and we can put Bob as the first name, and then I have to have the semicolon to close out that. And notice I define a string by using quotes. And so here I have this first name, Bob, and maybe I want to echo this out. And after echo, I need to put the line break in there. And so we're going to echo line break. And if I rerun our script, you can see we have Bob is echoed out. Now I want to clean this up a little bit. We have two strings here, first name, and we also have this string up here. This is indeed a string because remember we defined a variable and we put it in quotes. So that's our definition of a string right there. If we want, we can even maybe move this down under string because that is really what it is. This line break is a string. Now when I have two strings, for example, line break and first name, I can concatenate them together. So I don't have to have two separate echo statements. I'm going to get rid of the bottom one. And to dynamically concatenate, we don't use plus signs in PHP. In fact, if you try this, you will end up with an error. I mean, my IDE is already trying to protect me, saying, whoa, that's the wrong string concatenator. But go ahead and run it. You'll end up with a fatal error. And so this is what errors look like. You can see you get a little bit of information here, unsupported operand type string plus string. What that's complaining about is instead of a plus sign, we want to use a dot. And that's going to concatenate our first string, which is first name, and our line break together. So it'll put them all together on one line. And if I refresh this, I will end up with what looks to be the same, but really there's a line break in here. And we can see that more clear. For example, if I type in maybe a last name, and I want to put my last name on a new line. And now you can see it says Bob Cravens and my last name's on a separate line. Now notice after I echo this out, I didn't add another line break. So if I were to echo out maybe another string, which was some random string here, what you're going to see is it's going to tack it on to this same line as my last name. And that's probably not what we want. We probably wanted it to be, maybe even another line break here. And now you can see the random string is on its own line. Let's do a couple more things with strings here. I'm going to get rid of random string. We don't need that. But let's take a look at this line. What if I echo out and I want to put maybe my first name and my last name on the same line? So I can concatenate these together. But instead of putting a line break, I'm going to put another string. And we are going to use last name. And then I'll do the line break just like it suggests here. So first name, space, last name, line break. Let's see what we get here now. So I save this. And we get what we expected. First name, space, last name, and then there's a line break. Now there's other ways to define strings also. So for example, let's put in favorite color. And I'm going to define a string using a single quote. And we're going to say favorite color is red. And we're going to echo out favorite color. And let's see, make sure that this works here. So now I'm expecting my favorite color to be red. It'll be right under here. And now you can see red. So these are all string variables. I can define a string variable using double quotes, or I can define it using single quotes. All right, so let's talk about the difference between single quotes and double quotes. Most of the time, it doesn't really matter. So It doesn't matter if I define this from single quotes or double quotes. In fact, if I change this to single quotes and I refresh this, I should end up with the same exact output over here. And you can see that is the case. I like to be consistent. So most of the time, I prefer single quotes. And for all my applications, I'm constantly using single quotes on all of my variables. And so if I just update this all to single quotes, you'll see that nothing really changes. And here's one more set of double quotes. Get rid of that. So now I've converted this whole application to use single quotes. And again, if I save it and I refresh the page, nothing should change. And you can see it's exactly the same as it was before. Some reasons why you may have to use double quotes instead of single quotes is whenever you have a character that needs an escape sequence. And what that means is, for example, here I'm using a single quote, but what if I wanted to have it actually type something like this? Bob Craven's favorite color is red. So what if I wanted to type in that sentence right there? So let's go ahead and try to piece this together. So that's my first name. And then there is going to be a space, and then there's my last name. And then there's this quote. I have to get this quote here. And so how do I put that quote there? If I use single quotes, I can't really add a third quote. That's not good syntax. It won't let me put it in there. So now I have to use double quotes to get that single quote. And so that's one way to do it. And let's go ahead and finish this out. And I can see we're going to need a space here and a space there, probably. And then we're going to put favorite color. And then we want the exclamation mark and then a line break. Okay. So we're going to end that with a semicolon. We got echo first name. We got a space, echo last name. We're echoing out that apostrophe, which is right here. We echo out favorite color is, and then we echo out the favorite color with an exclamation mark and then a line break. So let's go ahead and run this. We'll save and run this. And so now we can see that we have an apostrophe. So that's one use case where I need to use a double quote. Another use case where I want to use double quotes is this whole thing that we just wrote here is a little kind of complex because we have all these concatenation operators. There's a much simpler way to write this. And so I can write variables inside double quotes. So I can write first name. I can put the space. I can put last name. I can put the apostrophe there. I can put favorite color is and favorite color, which is the variable. The exclamation mark. I need that line break, but I'm going to go ahead and close this out, and then we'll tack on our line break like that. This should be the same line as that right there. So I'm going to refresh this after I save it, and we should end up with the same thing. And so now you can see we get the same line twice because the first time I used single quotes to kind of, and the concatenation operator to kind of build up this string. And the second way is I use the double quotes, and I just have the variables inside of my double quoted string. In fact, I can put right here my BR tag and get rid of this. So I don't need that concatenation operator at all. So now you've got variable name first name, we've got the variable last name, we've got the favorite color, we've got this BR tag, we have the apostrophe in there. These two lines of code emit the same result. So first name, last name, and depending upon the application and depending upon what you're trying to build, you may opt for this one that's on line 12, or you may opt for this one that's on line 13. So just depending on how you're writing your code. But that's kind of some differences between single quotes and double quotes. So again, most of the time when I'm building strings, I will probably just use single quotes. Another data type is an integer. And integers, maybe it's something like my age. And we'll just say that that's 25 for today. And again, I've defined age, which is my variable name, and I defined it by set it to an integer by setting it to a number. If you remember from school, integers are like whole numbers. So they're 25, 13. It could be negative numbers, minus 12, but it's not numbers that have decimal points like 25.3. And that's a different data type. We'll talk about that in a second. But now I've got this data type called age. And I can echo out, for example, Bob is, and I can put this in here. So Bob is age years old. Let's go ahead and refresh our page. And you can see this here. So Bob is 25 years old. And you can do operations on integers just like you normally would. So for example, my height, so my whole number of feet is I am 6 foot. All right. And then inches, I am 4 inches. So I'm 6 foot 4 inches tall. And so for example, if I wanted to find out my total number of inches, I can define a new variable and I can do math formulas here. So that would be the feet, and then there's 12 inches per foot plus my inches. And then we can echo out, Bob is total inches, and we'll put inches tall. All right, so now I've done a little integer math, right? I've taken feet and inches, and I got some total inches tall. So let's go ahead and save this, and we will refresh it. And I'm 76 inches tall. And so you can see operands here like addition, you can see multiplication, there's division, there's whole number operations. I'm not going to dive into all the different operators that you can use for integers, but just know that an integer is a data type that you can use. Same thing with a float. These are decimal numbers. So as an example here, if I want to have a short version for pi, we don't have to do this because PHP has a variable for pi that's a lot of digits long. But let's say I just wanted to say it's 3.14. And then I can echo out pi is pi. Let's do that. So I have this variable called pi, and I just set it to 3.14. So it's got 2 decimals to it. I'll save. Let me refresh here. And you can see pi is 3.14. If I wanted to compute maybe how tall I am in feet, I can take my variable that I already computed up here, that's still in scope, total inches, and I'm going to divide by 12. All right, and then let's go ahead and echo this out. Bob is total feet. Let's change this to feet tall, and we'll save and refresh. And you can see it says Bob is 6.333333 feet tall. Now, one of the ways I can clean this up is there's a lot of different functions in PHP that we're not going to dive into today. But as an example, there's a function called number format. I can give it a float and a number of decimals. Now, I wrote it like this because I want to show you one of the challenges that we'll run into. Is this is a function call, but PHP really can't tell the difference. Did you meant to type this as a string? Is that a string or is it a function? Now, it understands variables because I have a $sign in front of them. If I refresh this, let's see what it's going to print out. You can see it took it as a literal string and it printed it all out for me. I don't want that, but what I wanted was I have to end this string, use the concatenation operator, here and add a quote to begin that ending string. And so now you can see this is syntax highlighted as blue, that it's a function and that it takes a float and a number of decimal places. So I can clean this up a little bit here. I'm going to go ahead and refresh, and now it says Bob is 6.33 feet tall. All right, this video is getting a little long. I just want to cover one more data type in here. I want to cover something called a boolean. This is like a true or false type of variable. And as an example, maybe I want to introduce a variable to indicate if someone is over 5 feet tall. So maybe it's like is over 5 feet tall. And you can use your variable names as long as you want. And in this case, that would be true for me. This is the value, it's true, or it can be false. So booleans are true or false. And we'll go ahead and echo out that variable. So Bob is, and then we'll echo this variable out here. And let's just, for instance, see what it says. And you can see when it renders Boolean values, it renders this as a 1. in this case because it's true. If I switch this to false and I re-render it, you can see it doesn't render anything here. Now, later on, we're going to come back to conditionals. And when we talk about conditionals, we'll talk about how to fix this a little bit. But for now, I'm just going to leave it as true and we'll render it as a 1. So those are the data types that I wanted to cover in this video. So we've got strings, we got integers, we got floats, and we got booleans.